Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second of this series of webinars around the Level 5 Operations Manager Standard revisions. What we're going to focus on today is the best practice approach to assessment. So, as usual, let's just go through the housekeeping. So, of course, this session is being recorded, as our sessions always are, and will be sent to all attendees after the webinar. Everyone is on mute, so please do pop any comments or questions in the chat function. Now, as we've said, the slides will be sent along with the webinar recording, and that will be sent within a few days. Now, we are seeking to update the platform to include a transcribe function going forward. Unfortunately, it won't be available within this particular session, but of course, please do reach out if anybody would like any particular detail from here, but it's something we will look at going forward. Please ask your questions and comments. Please add them into that chat and question panel, which you can see at the side in the control panel. And if the session does cut off, please do use your original webinar link to gain access back into the session. You can, of course, join over the telephone by selecting the phone call in the audio pane. If you're struggling with the video, I know lots of people struggle with the bandwidth these days with the volume of people on it. So please do rejoin if the session does cut off. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, I'm just going to introduce you to the team that I'll be contributing today, and then we'll be looking a little bit at the background to the revisions to this particular standard and how we are, where we are. Then Rebecca, one of our lead assessors, is going to take you through the detail of this assessment plan and these revisions and what this will mean for you in terms of your delivery. Maurice will then take us through into the endpoint assessment considerations, and then I'll just touch on the timelines for this particular standard, some of the benefits of working with us at ILM, and what our next events are. So you can see the team there. So that's me in the top left-hand corner, Julie Rowlett. I'm the ILM Technical Advisor, which means I'm on hand to support with any specific questions or queries across the whole of the portfolio. So anything on from here, then please do reach out. I've been involved with ILM about 20 years now for my sins. So please do reach out, and we can answer any questions that you might have. Rashenda, who's our product manager, is also going to do a session. So she's been very, very close to the development and revisions to these standards, being part of the Trailblazer group. Maurice is one of our specialist endpoint assessment partnership managers, so she can support you with any queries about the EPA process or indeed the EPA platform. And Rebecca, last but not least, is one of our lead independent endpoint assessors, so very much gets involved in the undertaking of our EPA events and also supporting all of our other assessors. So I'm now going to move on and hand you over to Rashenda, who's going to talk to you about the background to the changes for this standard. Over to you, Rashenda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Julie. So good morning, everybody. So just to reiterate, really, the background to changes, I was on the steering group. I still am on the steering group. And I want to just state where we are in terms of this standard, and just some things that you just need to be aware of with this level 5. So in terms of the new standard is due to be released in 2 days' time on the 19th of September. What that means, however, is if you look on the website today, you won't find that, not unless you go into the hyperlink. So please go into the hyperlink to find the revised standard. Note, there is a change of title. So as of the 19th of September, if you're looking for the standard, you will have to look for it under the Operations Manager title. So the Department Manager aspect of the title has now gone. Now, the good news is that the maximum funding band has risen to £9,000. But again, this is for new starts only. So anybody who is registered on the 19th of September or thereafter. And the typical practical period has also been reduced to 24 months now. So please be aware of that. The gateway period is 5 months within this for this standard. Now, there are some there are some changes afoot that have to yet be agreed in terms of the written report aspect of the component. Now, Rebecca will go through this in some more detail, but we're still just waiting on there's just a few little tweaks that IFA want to just confirm with providers that they are happy. So please look out for that, because what they've said is that they will put a banner onto the IFA website stating very clearly about the need to write a report for the project and present around the project and in preparation for the presentation. So please be very aware of that, because there are changes and it has not yet been agreed by at Root Panel and the Trailblazer Group. So in terms of the occupational profile, it's very clear now, as have IFA, they've aligned all the levels of all the standards, what is expected of this person as an apprentice. So within the level 5, this is a middle manager. They want them to be somebody who is operational and has project responsibilities, and they will ensure teams carry out their roles to meet the organisation's goals. It's very clear within the occupational profile, and the duties allow the providers to see if that person will have access to the opportunities to train and gain those competencies whilst they're on the programme. And remember, just to say, you know, that this is the end goal. Somebody should be, by the end of the practical period, be able to complete these duties to that level of competency by the end of their practical training period. So Rebecca will go through the 25 Ks where they sit within the assessment period, and also the 21 skills that they need to have acquired whilst on the training programme. And with the behaviours, there are 6 behaviours. The first 5 are exactly the same as the level 3. So again, we're seeing this real theme within IFA now across the levels, but what they want in terms of people to demonstrate, you know, morality, honesty, self-sufficiency, etc. So have a look at those, and if you're in a position whereby you are delivering the 3 and the 5, you could use the resources to sort of help train that person whilst on programme. So with that, this EPA, once it's passed, will provide that apprentice with professional recognition, of which Julie is the expert on that. She can give a wealth of information if you're more interested within that. So I will hand you now over to Rebecca. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. For those of you who has joined, my name's Rebecca Lindley, and I'm one of the lead independent apprenticeship assessors. So as I mentioned on the level 3, welcome to the deeper dive into the new level 5 operations manager. This is a follow-on from the previous webinar on the 29th of August, where we actually compared the existing level 5 operations departmental manager standard and the new operations manager. We're going to look now at the changes in the assessment. And as Rashida mentioned, it's still not final. We are still waiting for things to be confirmed, but we will announce those as well as soon as we know. So these are, to date, the changes. So when it comes to gateway requirements, the endpoint assessment takes place after the on-programme phase, which typically lasts for 24 months. Now, the endpoint assessment is completed within the endpoint assessment period, which again lasts typically 5 months after the gateway requirements have been met. And those gateway requirements are the completion of the on the programme training, including off off the job. The apprentice's employer must be content that the apprentice is occupationally competent. That is, that they are deemed to be working at or above the level set out in the apprenticeship standard and ready to undertake the endpoint assessment. As always, the employer may take advice from the apprentice's training provider, but they themselves must make the decision. So as well as completing their training, they need to achieve the maths and English laid out by the funding rules. They need to have completed all of those gateway requirement forms. They need to submit a portfolio of evidence in line with the required KSBs. And I am going to go through that in more detail, because there are some quite interesting questions around the evidence that are popping up around that. They need employer confirmation of occupational competence, and access requirements and reasonable adjustments need to be approved at this stage. Again, Julie will just go into that in a little bit more detail at the end. So there are two assessment methods with the operations manager. There's a written project report with presentation and questions. The duration is 60 minutes, typically split 20 minutes presentation, 40 minutes question and answer, and there's that 10% contingency. So if the presentation doesn't last 20 minutes, the rest of that, so the whole hour, will need to be taken up with questions. So it has to last 60 minutes, and then there's the 10%. That does also apply for the team leader, but I'm not going to go back into that. The second component is the professional discussion. That's underpinned by this portfolio of evidence. And again, that lasts for and must last for 60 minutes. And there's that 10% additional time that can be attributed to enable the apprentice to finish their last answer. So the agreed project will present a typical business task appropriate for demonstrating the skills and knowledge on the standard. The agreed project will be comparable in terms of content and complexity for all apprentices. It's the context within which the knowledge and the skills must be demonstrated that will vary. So that basically is, obviously it depends on what sector the apprentice is in. Now, the project itself is not part of the endpoint assessment. So the project is typically undertaken in the employee's premises or the training provider's premises. It depends what's required, but that's taken on programme. And again, yeah, if we could just move on to the next slide, I just want to go through the grading criteria. So this is exactly the same. The fail, the pass, and the distinction criteria. Again, all pass assessment methods need to be achieved to achieve the pass, and all pass and distinction assessment methods need to be achieved to be awarded the distinction. So if we could just move on to the roles and responsibilities. So just to reiterate that the success of the endpoint assessment process relies on the effective collaboration of the stakeholders that you can see down your slide. So the apprentice responsibility is to complete all their training, to compile the portfolio and meet all of those gateway requirements. I'll put my teeth back in. I do apologise. The employer is responsible for supporting the apprentice, selecting the endpoint assessment organisation, and confirming the apprentice's readiness for the endpoint assessment. Now, within this standard, there are 14 occupational duties. So again, the employer needs to be aware of these and to provide opportunities for their apprentice to be able to participate in these, because these will be tested throughout both of the assessment components. The training provider supports the apprentice with the training and also advises the employer on the apprentice's progress. And again, another key consideration is ensuring that the employer is providing the competencies for those 14 duties, which will be tested at the endpoint assessment. And finally, the endpoint assessment organisation, who conducts the endpoint assessment in line with the standards, ensures fair assessment and awards the final grade. Okay, so if we could just move on to the next slide. So this, for those who haven't seen them, is an overview of those occupational duties. Although it's a busy slide, it's definitely worth having sight of those. So as I've just mentioned in the previous slide, it's really important in those tripart meetings that you and the employer ensure that the apprentice has exposure to and understands all of these duties to allow them to discuss it in the endpoint assessment. All of those 14 duties are aligned with both of the assessment methods. That's the professional discussion and the written project report and presentation. And both assessment methods cover a range of knowledge, skills and behaviours. Again, these are all related to those duties listed in front of you. Okay, so if we could just move on to the weightings of the assessment components. So these are a 50-50 split. 50% is the written 4,000 word project report with presentation and questions. Again, the presentation and questions must last for a total of 60 minutes. And the professional discussion, again, 50% weighting, that's underpinned by the portfolio of evidence. And again, that duration is for 60 minutes plus that 10%. And again, the grading we've already gone through is on that slide. So if we could move on to the next component. So the written project report with presentation and questions. Currently, you submit a project proposal brief summary at Gateway. This is the component Rashenda was talking about, and this potentially could go, but we can't confirm it. So we're looking that potentially that section's going to go, and what will happen instead is during the 5-month endpoint assessment period, the apprentice must then create their 4,000 word report and presentation as part of their component. But I'm going to go through what we do know. So the written project report with presentation and questions involves the apprentice completing a significant project that has real benefit, application and benefits. Each project will take typically 6 months to complete. Like I said, the project is undertaken and completed on programme and pre-gateway to the endpoint assessment. The project itself is not part of the endpoint assessment. Now, the apprentice may work as part of a team to complete the project. This could include internal colleagues or technical experts. The important part is the apprentice must, however, complete their written project report. So that's the written 4,000 word project report and write their presentation unaided. and they must be reflective of their own role and contribution. So if it was done in a team, we don't need to know the team's role, it's what they did in the context of their project. The apprentice and the employer must confirm this when the written project report and any presentation materials are submitted. So what is the written project report designed to do? It's designed to demonstrate the application of knowledge, skills and behaviours as they would occur in that occupational practice. It needs to be a significant and defined piece of work that has real business application and benefit. The written project report must meet the needs of the employer's business and be relevant to the apprentice's occupation and the apprenticeship. And what they're saying is producing a written project report reflects the normal practice in the workplace for an operations leader. So it demonstrates the apprentice's understanding of their organisation and department. Now, the presentation with questions and answers section, so this is the 60 minutes, the typical 20-minute presentation, 40-minute Q&A. This allows for the assessment of KSBs that take place over a long period of time. It allows for a broad set of KSBs to be evidenced during the post-gateway period. It assesses the KSBs holistically, and it just allows them to produce something that is of genuine business benefit to the apprentice's employer. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So what needs to happen? So the apprentice must complete and submit the written project report and any presentation materials to the endpoint assessment organisation by the end of week 12 of the endpoint assessment period. Like I say, it's still in approval, but potentially there's no kind of scoping document that's needed to be sent in for approval, but that does need confirming, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Now, some examples of the types of projects that could be used for the written project report. So there could be things like introduction of new process, service or product in the operational area, identification and implementation of a change plan to improve efficiency or direct saving, implementation of a performance improvement plan for the operational area that has required significant collaboration with wider stakeholders, or an evaluation of an internal comms project that involved communicating that change to different stakeholders. Now, whatever the project is, the report must include an executive summary. It must include an introduction. It must include the scope and the business need of the project, including KPIs, aims and objectives. It needs to include the research and analysis outcomes, the project outcomes, a reflection on whether it did or it didn't deliver the benefits, was it completed to time and cost, a discussion of those findings, recommendations and conclusions, and references from external resources, and again an appendix containing the mapping of the KSBs to the report. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. So like I've mentioned previously, the presentation with questions must last for 60 minutes. So if we've just jumped on a slide there. That's it. It must last for that 60 minutes plus the 10%. So if the presentation only lasts for 14 minutes, the rest of the time up to 60 minutes will be question and answers. So it is, my advice would definitely be to make sure that your apprentice fills that 20 minutes to make sure that you're confident that they are hitting those KSBs. The question and answer is structured to give the apprentice the opportunity to demonstrate those KSBs, and we should be able to get, the apprentice should be able to be demonstrating the highest available grades. Now, no matter what the topic area, the presentation should include an analysis of the internal and the external factors that impacted the choice of the project, a critical evaluation of the project activity, justifying the reason for the project, and a detail of the impact of the project, a detailed evaluation of the impact that the project has had on the organisation since it was completed. Okay, if we can just move on to the next slide. So the portfolio of evidence underpins the professional discussion. So the portfolio of evidence is a critical component of the apprenticeship, and it does provide the foundation for the professional discussion assessment. Apprentices must compile evidence that directly relates to the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are going to be evaluated in that professional discussion. Now, a typical portfolio will include about 16 discrete pieces of evidence mapped to the specific KSBs. And I just want to, at this point, because we've had a few questions coming through about the amount of evidence and whether they can submit more. You can submit as much as you want. However, I wouldn't think of it in that way. I would look at it from the view of your apprentice. So your apprentice has 60 minutes to discuss those pieces of evidence that they are attributing to those KSBs. So less is more. It means there's less paperwork for them to go through. So I would definitely limit the evidence pieces and get that really deep evidence piece that they can talk about a range of KSBs. It means that the apprentice is less stressed on the day and they're not having to flip through the portfolio, and it just gives a deeper conversation. So acceptable evidence can include workplace documents like policies and procedures, witness statements, annotated photographs or video clips. Again, they can only be up to 5 minutes long, and these need to show the apprentice actively engaged in their role. It's essential to avoid reflective accounts or self-assessment methods, and any contributions from the employer should be based on direct observations rather than opinions. Now, the evidence, as usual, must be valid and clearly attributable to the apprentice, and this is confirmed with those authenticity statements which are generated from the employer and the apprentice. The portfolio itself isn't assessed directly, so like I said, the more evidence pieces you put in, it's not going to help the apprentice, because we just look through it as endpoint assessors to form the topic and to form the questions. It's down to your apprentices to navigate the amount that they put in. So I would really request a lower amount of evidence pieces, it really does make a difference. After the review, the assessors do not provide feedback on the portfolio itself. We just concentrate on that discussion to gain competence. So yeah, those evidence pieces, as long as they've got notes, what's their role, how it impacts them, just to enable them to hit those KSBs and demonstrate their duties in that professional discussion. Okay, next slide. So the apprentice must have access to the portfolio of evidence for this component. It is open book. There is going to be a minimum of 5 questions asked by the assessor, and that is a minimum. Again, they will guide the apprentice through the discussion to make sure that all knowledge, skills and behaviours have been explored. And the themes that the discussion will cover will be things like stakeholder relationships, operational planning, organisational governance, and managing and leading a team. But basically, it covers the full scope of the KSBs. So if we could move on to the final slide I think I've got, which is around resits and retakes. So failed assessment methods must be resat or retaken within a 6-month period from the end of the endpoint assessment outcome notification. Otherwise, the entire, so both assessment methods will need to be resat or retaken in full. A resit is typically taken within 2 months of the endpoint assessment outcome notification, and the timescale for a retake is dependent on how much retraining is required, and again this is typically taken within 3 months of the endpoint assessment outcome. Resits and retakes are not offered to an apprentice wishing to move from a pass to a higher grade. The apprentice will get a maximum endpoint assessment grade of a pass if they need to resit or retake any of those assessment components. And the caveat with that is unless the endpoint assessment organisation determines that there are exceptional circumstances. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the mapping documents that we've produced for the previous webinar. And thank you so much. I hope that you all got an overview of the assessments for the new operations manager.
Hey, that's great. Thanks very much indeed, Rebecca. That was really helpful in terms of that detail. And I think as Rebecca said, 1 or 2 points not yet confirmed by the Trailblazer group. So we will come out to you as soon as we get the confirmation of that. Appreciate the standard going live very, very soon, but we will get back to you on that. So let's just see. There are 1 or 2 questions. I think we are keeping an eye on time, so we'll just maybe answer a couple and then come to you in the Q&A. Rebecca, there's quite a lot of questions just about the project piece that's within the actual on programme and then what's submitted at Gateway or what's worked on in Gateway. I think you've probably answered it in your slides, but could you just confirm the role of the project as part of the on programme and then how that relates through to the Gateway period?
Yeah, so the project is completed on programme pre-Gateway, so that's the project, and that's the substantial piece of work. The written report and the presentation are completed after Gateway, and they must be the apprentice's own work.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Great. Thanks very much indeed. And then just one other question, or a couple of questions around the evidence number pieces. I know, Rebecca, you mentioned it is a little bit unlimited. Maurice, is that something that you potentially have something you can contribute to in terms of how many pieces of evidence we would like to see within the portfolio?
Thank you, Julie. In terms of kind of submitting that evidence, we do ask for a limit on it. So it is typically 16 pieces of evidence, and that's to give to pull out those best pieces of evidence. We have had rejections in the past where there's been far too many pieces of evidence, and what we don't want to do is give an advantage to one apprentice over another by the types and amount of evidence that we're receiving. So we ask you to showcase that evidence and pull out to be able for the IEPA then to review to form that endpoint assessment component. So please be mindful of the number of pieces of evidence so that we don't send that back as a rejection of excessive evidence. Thank you, Julie.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Maurice. And then I think the rest of the questions we will address in the Q&A follow-up with the distribution of the webinar and the slides. And that's probably a good time to hand over to you, Maurice. So if you can take us through some of the EPA considerations. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maurice Hole and I'm one of 3 EPA partnership managers. We're based across the country, so we have Janice Collins in the north, Rebecca Hollenby in the Midlands and myself in the south. And we're here to support you through that EPA journey, especially with changes, and we can help clarify points as they come out. As Julie mentioned, we're waiting for a bit of clarification, so we can help support through that journey. Next slide, please, Julie. Just waiting for that slide. Lovely, thank you very much. So we use a platform called EPA Pro. Most of you will be aware on registering that, learners, and we always take your feedback and we make improvements to the platform that we use. So as you're going through this journey, if there's anything you would like the platform to do that it currently doesn't, please let us know, because we can help implement change as we go forward to make that journey easier for you. EPA Pro allows access to you as the training provider. Your employer can have access, and so can your learners. So you can see those resources that are in EPA Pro. You can follow that journey and just have sight of every step of the way of that endpoint assessment journey. And it gives full visibility from Gateway right the way through to results. Gateway is tailored, so as we have new versions come through of standards and new standards, we tailor those Gateway screens, so no matter who is putting through that process to submit the learner through, it will tell you exactly what piece of evidence that you are required to upload to avoid any delays of that learner going through the Gateway process. You'll receive tailored notifications, and they can be changed to staff members. Within EPA Pro, you can have read-only, full access, but you can tailor those notifications as well. So you're not getting too many and you're getting the information you need out of the platform. We will send notifications to apprentices leading up to their endpoint assessment. So when that's booked, they will get those date reminders, those good luck messages leading into the components of their endpoint assessments. Results take 7 working days. So once you've gone through that timeline, Julie will go through the timeline in just a moment, but once you've gone through that timeline, once that final component of endpoint assessment has been set, those results take 7 working days to come in and be able to share with your learners. And along with that, you get all grade outcome feedback. So that helps for you to share with your learners how they've done, but also help with your own standardization for future learners that are coming through endpoint assessment with you. You've got great reporting functions in here as well, so you can really drill down as your apprentices have come through Gateway, your completion rates, to help you manage your endpoint assessment and achievement data. And there will be a wealth of support in there to support that journey leading up to endpoint assessment, and have the exemplars and resources to prepare you and prepare your learners going into EPA. Next screen, please, Julie. Thank you. And there is a dedicated team. So as I've said, there's myself, Rebecca and Janice as endpoint assessment partnership managers, but you also have your account managers. You have support from Julie, our technical advisor. We have our digital solutions managers who are here to support you with the platforms that you need to use with City and Guilds and ILM. We have our events team to help support with dates if anything needs changing or anything like that. We've got those lines of communication open to support you, and of course we have centre support that are always on hand as well with any queries that you may have. But please feel supported through the journey of change. We're all here to make this smooth for you and for your learners as you go through endpoint assessment. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much, Maurice. That was really helpful. Okay, now I'm just going to take you through some of the timelines for this particular standard. Now, I think as we have discussed, there are some confirmations, some clarifications that we still need from the Trailblazer group in terms of this standard. So we'll update you as soon as we can. But typically this gateway period is now a 5-month period. As always, all of the evidence will be submitted at Gateway, the portfolio, all of the usual Gateway declaration forms, English and maths evidence. We then have that period of time where we review and check all of that off, and then check the portfolio for completeness. And then there is typically a 5-month Gateway period. Within that, once we get this confirmation, we will confirm that at the end of that confirmed period, once it's very clear, the apprentice will submit the project and the presentation. There'll then be that 2-week minimum period where the assessor prepares for the EPA event, and then the EPA will take place. But as I say, we'll come back to you and confirm all of that as soon as we have it from the Trailblazer group. I think, as Rebecca referred to, reasonable adjustment requests must be made and agreed prior to Gateway. So, of course, we have got very clear policies and processes in place in terms of making those specific requests. Unfortunately, the assessor on the day in the live event can't make any decision about those kind of arrangements, so they must be in place, which will sit in the notes section for the apprentices prior to the actual event. So if you need any support in terms of how to make the application for special considerations, then please do reach out. We can guide you further. And then just really the last couple of minutes from me, just in terms of taking you through some of the benefits of working with ILM, of which some of the facts that some of you will be familiar with. Of course, everybody who is registered for endpoint assessment with us, or indeed the diplomas, and all of your tutors involved with the delivery, can have access to free student or tutor resources from the Institute of Leadership, who are our membership partner. If anybody needs any support in gaining that access, either for your tutors or for your apprentices, then please do reach out and we can give you some support on that. All students successfully completing will receive, in addition to the parchment that they get from iFate, they'll receive our digital credential. Sorry, that's showing the level 3 team leader one there. They will get the level 5 operations manager, which will go directly to the registered email address that sits within EPA Pro. And of course, they can align that with their global brand recognition, with ILM's global brand recognition. Just a little bit of a summary of some of the resource and benefits that they get from the Institute of Leadership. Lots of resources that sit within the dimensions of leadership. Any of these bite-sized learning pieces that are completed then get captured in a My Learning record, which of course can help capture some of the information towards that 20% off the job. There's a whole host of webinars, podcasts, blogs, videos, worksheets, research reports. So a wealth of information that, as I've said, both tutors and apprentices can gain access to whilst they're on programme. And of course, the option then to upgrade to professional membership if they still want to be aligned to a professional body once they've completed. And then just a slide there on how they can share their digital credentials once they've received those on successful completion. They're very, very easy to share via, I think, professional social media platforms such as LinkedIn. They're a great way of demonstrating abilities because of the skills tags and the detail that sits within that metadata behind the credential. And of course, no more lost certificates. I'm sure we've all experienced the pain of people not being able to find those English and maths certificates when it comes up to endpoint assessment. So because these are stored in a cloud basis, then they're always accessible, and I think particularly help build, as we're increasingly building that digital professional brand. So all of the Q&A will be answered in a follow-up with the recording and the slide deck. We do have our next webinar, which is any questions. So once you've had time to review the documents that we've sent out, and of course now the mapping documents, then you can ask further questions at our webinar on the 2nd of October. So please do sign up for that. We have a couple of other supporting webinars, one that's being run today, Ask the Auditor, and our funding and policy update webinar. Please do register for those, and if you can't attend, then the recordings will be available both on the Sitting Guilds and the ILM website. Just one little tip about the links. I think one or two people said the links don't seem to work. If you put the PowerPoint into the presentation mode, so into that slide deck, then that's when the links seem to become active. So just in that normal deck, they might not be active, but in the PowerPoint presentation mode, they are. As I say, we will follow up with questions at the end within the Q&A. Do sign up to our preference site and of course our social media channels where you can follow us. And just to say thank you from us and the panel here who have been on board supporting today, and we'll see you at our follow-up event. Thanks very much indeed.